They never worked in the same lab. They never co-wrote a paper. But deep in their private thoughts beyond equations and patents, Einstein and Tesla agreed on one chilling truth. The human brain is not the source of the soul. It's a receiver, a conduit, a translator for something far older than time itself. Tesla once said, "My brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration." Einstein echoed the mystery, writing that the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind its faithful servant. Both believed that what we call consciousness isn't made inside the skull. It's tuned in like a signal from a dimension science still can't name. And here's the part no one wants to admit. If the brain doesn't create the soul, then death doesn't end it, and neither does brain damage, memory loss, or even time. This isn't just philosophy. Modern science is starting to catch up. Children remembering past lives, people with near zero brain tissue still conscious, organ recipients dreaming the memories of their donors. We were told the soul was superstition, but what if we were wrong? What if Einstein and Tesla weren't imagining, but remembering? Welcome to the secret they both knew, and the science that's finally beginning to prove it. In the public eye, Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla were opposites. Einstein, the patient theorist; Tesla, the electric prophet. Einstein gave us relativity. Tesla lit up the modern world. But behind closed doors, beneath the press headlines and academic politics, was a shared, whispered understanding, one they never openly debated, because for them it was not a debate. It was a truth too vast for most minds to accept. The brain is not the origin of consciousness. It is a receiver for something deeper, older, and far more eternal. In a letter dated 1925, Tesla wrote, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." He wasn't just speaking about energy. He was speaking about the essence of life, the force behind intuition, inspiration, and identity. He believed the mind tapped into an external field, what he sometimes called the core of the universe. And this wasn't New Age fluff. For Tesla, the universe was alive with frequency, vibration, and resonance. He once said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." To him, the brain was a highly tuned receiver, not a generator. Just as a radio doesn't create the music, it catches it, so too does the brain catch thoughts, emotions, dreams, and even the soul's voice. Now, contrast this with Einstein. He was a man of equations, but also a man of deep spiritual awe. He said, "The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all science." In 1945, just months before his death, Einstein wrote privately to a friend in Zurich, "I do not believe that consciousness ends with the body. I cannot prove this by mathematics, but the intuition is strong within me." Einstein, like Tesla, saw the mind as interfacing with something greater. He once described the human being as a part of the whole, but confused into believing itself separate, a spiritual illusion caused by physical perception. Both men, in their own language, hinted at a cosmos filled with unseen intelligence. Tesla's universe was an ocean of frequencies, with the soul as a unique tuning fork. Einstein's universe was a grand field of unity, where individual consciousness was a ripple on the surface of a deeper being. Neither believed the soul could be reduced to gray matter. And here's where it gets even more compelling. Despite their differences and even their known animosity at times, neither Tesla nor Einstein ever publicly attacked each other's views on consciousness, because at the level of soul, there was no conflict, only confirmation. Both were men born ahead of their time, walking a razor's edge between science and spirit. And in that narrow space, they saw the same thing, that our mind is not who we are. that we are not trapped in the skull, that the soul precedes the brain and survives it. And this shared truth may be the most important thing they ever discovered. Even if they never put it in a textbook, Nikola Tesla never cared much for academic approval. He trusted what he saw, felt, and intuited often years before the rest of the scientific world caught up. And when it came to the nature of the mind, he didn't hesitate. Consciousness is not a product of the brain. The brain is simply a finely tuned receiver, drawing signals from a higher source. He called it the ether. To Tesla, the ether wasn't a fantasy or forgotten myth. It was real as electricity flowing through a copper wire. He believed that beyond the physical universe existed a subtle field of energy and intelligence, invisible to the naked eye, but no less essential. This ether, he claimed, was the true origin of thought, intuition, and soul. The brain was like a radio catching signals from this field, converting them into images, emotions, and decisions. He wrote in his personal journals, "The brain is only a conductor. The real spark lies beyond." In today's terms, Tesla was describing something very close to the quantum field, what modern physicists now call zero-point energy, or the unified field. Tesla's receiver theory also explains his wild bursts of creativity. He often said that ideas didn't come from analysis. They arrived, fully formed like bolts of lightning, complete with detailed blueprints, schematics, and instructions. One famous story recounts how he saw the complete design of his rotating magnetic field motor, not after months of trial and error, but in a single flash during a walk in the park. That wasn't just genius, it was connection. To Tesla, that flash came from the universal mind, a place beyond time and matter. He also warned that mainstream science would lose its soul if it continued to view consciousness as nothing more than brain chemistry. He believed that by rejecting the ether, science was rejecting its ability to understand the human spirit. Tesla once said, "The day when the science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." He wasn't being poetic. He was calling for a revolution, a shift from viewing man as a machine made of meat to seeing man as a transmitter of cosmic wisdom. In fact, Tesla's inventions were not separate from his spirituality. He saw the entire universe light, vibration, electricity, mind as connected by unseen laws, and he designed his machines to mirror those laws. Even his famous Wardenclyffe Tower, meant to transmit wireless electricity across the globe, was inspired by his understanding of resonance, both physical and metaphysical. He believed that if energy could be broadcast wirelessly, so could thought, so could soul. In this view, death is not an end, because the receiver may break, but the signal remains. The body may decay, but the essence, the consciousness, returns to the field. This is the core of Tesla's view. The brain receives, the field remembers, the soul continues. And now, decades later, modern neuroscience is slowly stumbling toward what Tesla claimed a century ago. Experiments in telepathy, intuition, and even quantum entanglement hint at a non-local mind, one that is not housed in the brain, but tapped into something bigger. In Tesla's time, this was called madness. Today, we call it the cutting edge, and he saw it all coming. Albert Einstein is often remembered as a man of numbers, formulas, and the curvature of space-time. But those who truly knew him, who read his private letters, who listened between the lines of his lectures, saw something else. A man haunted by the idea that there is more to reality than what we can measure, that the invisible, the unprovable, the felt but not seen holds the deeper truth. And at the heart of this truth was what he called the unified field. Einstein spent the final decades of his life chasing something he never quite found, a single theory that could unify gravity, electromagnetism, and the subatomic forces of the universe. But behind that search was a deeper yearning, to understand how everything is connected. He once wrote, "A human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space." He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. In other words, the boundaries we believe are real between self and other, between body and soul, may be illusions. For Einstein, consciousness wasn't trapped in the brain. He saw the mind as interwoven with the structure of the cosmos, like a thread in an invisible fabric. That's why he was so drawn to the idea of the unified field. Because to him, it wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. He called this understanding cosmic religious feeling, a term he used to describe the overwhelming sense of awe and unity he felt in the presence of nature, mathematics, and silence. It was not a belief in a personal God, but a deep reverence for a mysterious intelligence that seemed to underlie everything. This perspective aligned him more with mystics than mechanists, and though he didn't speak of it often in public, his personal writings reveal a profound recognition that the soul may not be an accident of evolution, but a thread woven through space and time, linked to everything else by a field we still can't see. He once told a colleague, "My religion consists of a humble admiration of the illimitable superior spirit who reveals himself in the slight details we are able to perceive with our frail and feeble mind." This wasn't just metaphor. Einstein believed that the mind of man could never fully grasp the depth of the universe because it was part of it, like a fish trying to understand the ocean, or a cell trying to understand the body. He was also deeply moved by the timelessness of energy and matter. His famous equation, EMC2, didn't just describe how matter becomes energy. It implied that nothing is truly lost, only changed, only transformed. In that light, the death of the body is not the death of the soul. It is a reconfiguration, a return to the unified field. And Einstein knew this at a soul level. When his closest friend Michel Besso died in 1955, just weeks before Einstein himself passed, he wrote a short letter of goodbye. "Now he has departed from this strange world a little ahead of me. That means nothing. People like us, who believe in physics, know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." That last phrase wasn't poetic. It was precise. Time is not what we think, and if time isn't fixed, neither is the soul bound by it. Einstein's unified field theory was never completed, but perhaps it didn't need to be, because what he gave us was something more profound than math. A glimpse into a universe where everything is connected, and where the soul is not separate from the cosmos, but made of the same fabric. We've been told for over a century that consciousness is nothing more than brain activity, chemical reactions and neural impulses firing like circuits in a machine. But what if that theory is crumbling? What if science, the very tool used to deny the soul, is now uncovering evidence it can no longer explain? The idea that the brain is not the source of consciousness isn't just spiritual, it's becoming scientific. Let's begin with a case that shook modern neuroscience. A man in France, in his mid-40s, who had lived an entirely normal life working, driving, parenting. He went to the doctor for a leg injury. Routine brain scans revealed 90% of his brain tissue was missing, gone, and yet he was fully conscious. He could speak, reason, remember, and live without noticeable deficits. Doctors were stunned. This one case challenged everything neuroscience assumed about brain volume and consciousness. How could a person think, feel, love, and dream without most of the organ we say creates the mind? The answer: maybe it's not the brain creating consciousness. Maybe it's the soul using the brain like a driver uses a car. If the car breaks down a little, the driver still exists. Now consider near-death experiences. or NDEs. These are not rare. Thousands of well-documented cases show people who were clinically dead flatline EEG, no heartbeat, no respiration, yet report vivid, coherent, often life-altering experiences. They describe leaving their bodies, watching doctors work on them from above, traveling through tunnels, meeting deceased loved ones, feeling overwhelming peace, and sometimes being told to return because their time hasn't come. These reports often include verifiable details the person couldn't have known, names of nurses they never met, conversations heard from rooms down the hall, descriptions of surgical tools, clothing, even music playing. If the brain was offline, who was doing the perceiving, and from where? Then there's the work of Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist who documented over 500 cases of children who recalled past lives, not vague dreams but specific names, addresses, family histories, and cause of death from lives they had no physical way of knowing. Many of these children spoke languages they had never been taught. Some had birthmarks or physical traits matching injuries from their previous life. In some cases, researchers verified the person the child claimed to be actually existed. This wasn't hypnotism. These were children under the age of 5, too young to fake it. And in many cases, their stories faded by the time they reached 6 or 7, as if the memory had come through temporarily, like a broadcast signal fading. Just as Tesla predicted, the body, the brain, it's a receiver. The soul, that's the signal. Organ transplant patients report something equally strange. There are dozens of documented cases where recipients took on personality traits, food preferences, or memories of the donors, things they had no prior exposure to. One woman who hated classical music began craving it after a heart transplant. Later, she discovered her donor had been a violinist. Another man began having vivid dreams of an accident and later learned his donor had died in a motorcycle crash, just as he had seen. These are known as cellular memory cases. But what if it's more than memory in the cells? What if the soul leaves imprints in the body like fingerprints in soft clay? Even quantum physics begins to support this. The observer effect shows that particles behave differently when being observed, suggesting that consciousness affects reality. Quantum entanglement proves that two particles, separated by vast distances, can influence each other instantly outside the bounds of space-time. This hints at a deeper connectivity, one that the brain can find to time, space, and biology can't fully explain, but the soul can. The more we study the brain, the more we find its limits. But the more we study consciousness, the more we uncover something immense, invisible, and non-local. Just like Tesla's ether, just like Einstein's unified field, and just like every ancient mystic who ever closed their eyes and touched eternity, science hasn't disproven the soul. It's inching closer to accidentally proving it. And when it does, everything changes, not just what we are, but what we're here to remember. There's a strange place we all go each night, a place where logic collapses, and images speak louder than words, where time stretches, collapses, and rewinds without permission. We call it dreaming, but for Tesla and Einstein, it was much more. They both believed that dreams, intuition, and sudden insights were gateways, not byproducts of the brain, but whispers from the soul. Nikola Tesla often spoke about his visions. He claimed that his most complex inventions didn't come from long hours at a desk, but from flashes of insight that arrived complete, like packages from another realm. He once said, "Invention is the result of long reflection in solitude. But the idea comes like a flash. It is born in a second. The mind becomes still, and the solution appears." That stillness he referred to, it wasn't empty. It was filled with something he couldn't explain, but always trusted. Albert Einstein shared a similar secret, his theory of special relativity, which changed how humanity understood space and time, didn't come from a chalkboard. It came from a daydream. As a teenager, he imagined himself riding alongside a beam of light, watching how the world would look if he could match its speed. That mental image became the seed of one of the most revolutionary scientific theories ever written. He would later say, "Imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world." That wasn't arrogance, it was humility. He knew that some truths don't arrive through calculation, they arrive through surrender. But where do these insights come from? Modern psychology might say the subconscious, but neither Tesla nor Einstein stopped there. They believed the subconscious was only the hallway the real voice came from beyond it. Tesla called it the mind of nature. Einstein referred to it as the superior spirit revealed in the subtle details of reality. This voice beyond thought often speaks in symbols, in metaphors, in sudden inner yes feelings that defy logic. It speaks in déjà vu, in sudden chills, in the knowledge you can't trace but can't deny. In dreams, it creates impossible worlds to show you forgotten truths. In intuition, it sends you nudges without explanation, turn left instead of right. Call this person today, walk away from that deal. And more often than not, it's right. Science still struggles to define intuition. Is it instinct? Probability? A lucky guess. But what if it's the soul's language, subtle, fast, and deeper than words? Tesla thought so. He once described intuition as a spark from the infinite. Einstein said, "The only real valuable thing is intuition." These men trusted what they felt before they trusted what they could prove, because they sensed that some truths can only be known, not shown. Across cultures, dreams and intuition have long been seen as portals to the soul. In ancient Egypt, dreams were messages from the gods. In Native American traditions, dreams were used to guide whole tribes. Carl Jung, too, believed that dreams connected us to the collective unconscious, a place where the soul remembers what the brain forgets. Einstein and Tesla may never have studied shamanism or mysticism formally, but they touched the same source. They knew that the deepest intelligence doesn't come with words. It comes in the quiet, where the soul speaks. So the next time an idea visits you out of nowhere, the next time your gut screams yes while your brain says no, pause. You may be hearing the same voice Tesla and Einstein followed their whole lives. Not logic, not memory, but the soul remembering what it's always known. We've built entire empires of thought on a single assumption, that the brain creates consciousness, that every thought, memory, feeling, and flash of intuition is generated by 3 pounds of soft tissue encased in bone. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if the brain is not the author of consciousness, but its translator? This idea is gaining ground, not only in spiritual traditions, but now, quietly, in modern science. It's called the transmission hypothesis, the concept that the brain doesn't produce the soul, but filters and transmits it, like a radio receiver. It doesn't create the broadcast, it simply makes it audible. And when the receiver is damaged or turned off, the broadcast doesn't stop. It just stops being heard in that particular location. Tesla understood this long before neuroscience had words for it. He said, "The brain is a very sensitive instrument. It does not generate thought, but rather receives and interprets it." To him, the brain was a tool, not the source, an instrument, not the musician. And like all instruments, it can become blocked, distorted, or broken, but the music remains. Einstein, though less direct, mirrored this belief in his writings. He believed that consciousness was part of a larger field, and that what we experience in waking life is only a thin sliver of what truly exists. He compared human perception to a flashlight shining in a dark room. We see only what the beam touches. But the room, the universe of consciousness, is still there, untouched by our limited senses. Let's bring this into modern terms. Imagine your brain is like a smartphone. It's an incredibly advanced tool, capable of receiving messages, playing music, displaying images, and connecting across the world. But if the screen breaks or the battery dies, you don't assume the internet is gone. You know the device has lost its ability to receive, not that the information has stopped existing. In this metaphor, your soul is the signal, and your brain is the phone. Death doesn't kill the signal. It only shuts off the screen. This view answers many mysteries that neuroscience cannot. Why do people with severe brain injuries sometimes retain deep spiritual experiences? Why do those with minimal brain function still display bursts of clarity before death? Why do some blind people report vivid visual detail during near-death experiences? If the brain were the sole source, none of this should happen. But if the brain is a receiver, then yes, it makes sense. Because the mind is not in the brain. The brain is in the mind, and the mind is part of something much, much larger. Tesla believed this is why solitude, silence, and stillness were essential. Not to stimulate the brain, but to quiet it, so the deeper signal could come through. Einstein felt the same. He would often retreat for long walks alone, letting his thoughts drift, because sometimes, to hear the soul, you have to turn down the noise of the body. This understanding also shifts how we view mental illness, trauma, even dreams. What if depression isn't a broken brain, but a blocked signal? What if healing isn't just chemical, but energetic and spiritual, realigning the tuner to receive the soul again? We begin to ask better questions. Not just what's wrong with the brain, but what is the soul trying to say that we've forgotten how to hear? The greatest scientists, mystics, and healers may have been pointing to the same truth all along. You are not your brain. You are the awareness behind it. You are the signal, not the machine. And the day humanity truly accepts this is the day science and spirit stop being enemies and become reflections of the same eternal source. What happens when a civilization forgets it has a soul? Not metaphorically, not poetically, but truly when an entire species begins to believe that consciousness is just chemistry, that love is just dopamine, and that life ends at the grave. We don't just lose meaning, we lose ourselves. In a world without the soul, everything becomes a transaction. Purpose is replaced by productivity. Wonder is replaced by efficiency. Children are raised to believe they are biological machines, programmed for survival, driven by impulse, rewarded by status. And when pain comes, deep pain, existential pain, there is nowhere to place it, nowhere for it to go. Because if the soul doesn't exist, then grief is pointless. Suffering is just bad programming. And death, it's a shutdown, nothing more. That belief, subtle, quiet, often unspoken, is now the foundation of much of modern life. And it's killing us. Depression is no longer rare. It's epidemic. In the United States alone, over 50 million adults suffer from anxiety or depression each year. Antidepressant use has skyrocketed, and among teenagers, those closest to the edge of memory, who still dream vividly and feel things before they can name them, suicide is now one of the leading causes of death. Why? Because we've taught them that their suffering is chemical, not spiritual, that their longing means nothing, that their dreams are just the brain misfiring at night. We've told them that there is no deeper self, no soul watching, loving, waiting to be remembered, and they're dying for that lie. Tesla warned of this. He saw the future being built on materialism, and he feared it. He once said, "The day when man will connect his soul to the forces of the universe will mark the beginning of a new civilization." Einstein, too, mourned the spiritual blindness of his time. He said, "The man who regards his own life and that of his fellow creatures as meaningless is not merely unhappy but hardly fit for life." He knew they both did, because without the soul, there can be no real love. Only hormones, no true awe, only reactions, no destiny, only survival. And yet there is a quiet return, a new awakening. More people today report spiritual experiences than ever before. Near-death survivors are coming forward with detailed memories. Children are remembering lives they never lived. Meditation, once mocked, is now prescribed. Dreams are being studied again not as nonsense, but as portals to deeper knowledge. Even science is beginning to speak a new language. Energy, frequency, field, non-local awareness, consciousness beyond the brain. The soul is knocking again, not at the doors of temples, but at the core of the human mind. Because here's the truth. We cannot medicate away spiritual hunger. We cannot algorithm our way out of existential grief. And no amount of progress will fill the aching void that only remembrance can heal. What Tesla and Einstein feared has already begun. But what they hoped for, that one day humanity would look inward again, not to escape the world, but to finally understand it. That hope is still alive. It lives in every person who has felt there is more to this life, in every whisper of intuition, in every dream that refuses to be forgotten, in every tear that makes no logical sense, but feels like a message from somewhere beyond. That is the soul speaking, and we've ignored it long enough. If Einstein and Tesla could stand among us now, in this world of artificial intelligence, digital distractions, and synthetic identities, what would they say? Would they be impressed by our speed, our code, our machines that learn to think? Or would they see a civilization drifting further from something infinitely more important? Not technology, but truth. Not data, but depth. Not machines that mimic the mind, but souls that have forgotten they exist. Tesla would likely stand in silence first, sensing the noise. Not just the noise of traffic or Wi-Fi, but the psychic noise, the overactive minds, the spiritual static, the desperate search for meaning in shallow places. He would say, "You have mastered the currents of the earth, but forgotten the current of the soul." He would see how we wire our homes to glow through the night, yet darken the inner rooms of the spirit. He would see us connect across oceans in milliseconds, yet feel more isolated than ever. And then, with the same quiet intensity he once directed toward electricity, he would remind us, "You are still transmitters, still receivers, but you've tuned into the wrong frequency." Einstein, too, would speak softly like a father who sees a child lost in a dream of machines. He would marvel at quantum computing, at particle colliders, at spacecraft touching the edges of our solar system. But then he would ask, "You've traveled so far outward, but how far inward have you gone?" He would sit beside a teenager numbed by social media and say, "The most important thing is not what you know, it's that you still feel wonder." Because for Einstein, the scientific mind was not enough. It needed awe, reverence, a sense of belonging to something eternal. If these two minds, so different in personality, so united in spirit, could leave us with one message, it might be this: the future is not in the machine. It's in the soul that remembers who programmed the stars. We are not here to worship logic. We are here to harmonize it with love, with beauty, with consciousness that outlives the body, the brain, even the galaxies themselves. The awakening they spoke of has already begun. It begins every time someone closes their eyes and listens inward. Every time a scientist dares to dream. Every time a human being realizes they are more than a body, more than a name, more than a product of accident. They are a transmission of light, a reflection of source, a soul that never left home, only forgot. And now, as humanity stands at the edge of a new era, a time of synthetic intelligence, genetic rewriting, and planetary transformation, the question is not what can we build, but what must we remember? Because in the end, what Einstein and Tesla agreed on wasn't just that the brain doesn't create the soul, It was that the soul is the source of everything worth building, and it's time to return to it. Maybe you felt it, too. That quiet knowing, that still, ancient voice inside whispering that you are not just a body, not just a name, not just a fleeting thought in a dying world. You are more. You always were. And perhaps the reason these words resonate is not because you're learning something new, but because you're remembering something eternal. Tesla knew, Einstein knew, and deep down, so do you. If this message stirred something in you, if a part of your soul blinked awake while listening, don't let the feeling fade. Stay, sit with it. Let it open something that the world told you to forget. Then share this video with someone who might need it, someone lost in logic, someone quietly searching for light. And if you want to walk further on this path, into more stories like this, more hidden truths, more whispers from the soul, subscribe to this channel, because this is not the end. It's the beginning of remembering who you are and who you've always been.